Taylor Swift has officially reclaimed her third studio album, Speak Now, with the release of Taylor's version on July 7th. In this video, we are decoding the vault tracks, what they reveal about Taylor's writing process during the era, and arguably who the real villain was this era. Spoilers, it was not John Mayer. We'll also briefly discuss some key differences between the originals and the re-recordings, and I'll assign this re-recording a score. Speak Now, as I discussed in my era recap video, is arguably her most valuable re-recording to date. If you want my thoughts on that era and the tracks that we've heard and loved, check that out. Speak Now is not valuable just from a sentimental value, but financially as well, due to every track on this album being exclusively penned by Taylor herself. The royalty and publishing alone are worth a pretty penny, especially when we talk about the songs being reused in movies and TV shows. This was also a record that underscored Swift's insane talent, songwriting-wise and as a businesswoman. With Taylor's version, this is the first record that she owns that's completely self-written, an accomplishment few in her field actually have. On the stolen version, only one bonus deluxe track, if this was a movie, had a co-writer. It was properly left off Taylor's version and reclassified into a Fearless TV era track when Taylor released 4 songs at the start of her Eras tour, which included that song, the 2 underrated Hunger Games soundtrack cuts, and a previously leaked Lover demo, All of the Girls You've Loved Before. After months of speculation and teasers throughout the Midnights era, Taylor formally announced Speak Now Taylor's version on her May 5th Eras Tour show in Nashville. On July 7th, Speak Now was released again, to positive reception. Taylor also premiered the music video for I Can See You, which stars her ex Taylor Lautner and Joey King, who played the little girl in the Mean video. This video has to be one of the best Taylor's directed to date, just a fun, self-referential heist that sees a trio of spies free Swift from the vault of a museum dedicated to the Speak Now era. The action, the design, and the story has to be amongst her best. This summer's blockbusters may be tanking, but Taylor Swift is not. Okay, let's talk about the vault tracks. There are only 6 vault tracks on this record. Each track comes in longer than 4 minutes, and the last 3 songs are over 5 minutes each. This is something we don't get nowadays due to the demands of a streaming, TikTok-dominated age. Early Taylor was quite didactic and relished the songwriting process and the art of descriptive verses, catchy choruses, and of course, building some of the best bridges in musical history. The original release is an underrated marvel that I argued showed her leaning towards the pop space long before the Red and 1989 eras. One particular sound on Speak Now I wish she'd revisit nowadays was a more pop rock slant. Songs throughout the album are anchored around a electric guitar, some pulsing drums, just some rock vibes, and it's very clear that from these vault tracks that she really did explore that sound and other soundscapes while making this record. She even brought on 2010 rock staples Fall Out Boy and Hayley Williams of Paramore, who were really pioneers at the time of Speak Now's original release, to feature on 2 different tracks. I can't help but remember how Taylor had some conflict with Big Machine Records when creating Speak Now's original cut. She initially meant for the album to be called Enchanted. Her then collaborator, the president of Big Machine Records, Scott Borchetta, who would ironically go on to sell her masters kickstarting this whole re-recording business, asked her to change it, deeming it immature. Swift would choose Speak Now to emphasize the essence of the record, saying what you feel or dealing with the consequences later. Ironically, 13 years later, I think she's still trying to tell us something. Fans were stunned that the Speak Now portion of the Eras tour only contained Enchanted, a fan favorite due to TikTok and nostalgia that has endured as an all-time classic of hers. But what if its placement was a message to us? The emphasis on Enchanted, how it's become an avatar for this re-recording, might be Taylor signaling to us that she still sees this album as enchanted in some ways. These vault tracks, which branch off into very interesting and diverse directions, make me think that Borchetta's maturity excuse was just him wanting a safer country record. The vault tracks take big swings, and it's now clear that Swift was denied the chance to make this the true romantic sweeping epic it was meant to be. Today, we now have the complete tale in her quest to slay the dragons who stole her treasure. Electric Touch with Fall Out Boy definitely sounds like a product of its time. It's not quite my favorite track, it's very 2010s rock. It's a smart blend of Taylor's sound with some emo punk elements, like a clearer, more refined version of her collaboration, Two Is Better Than One. Anyone remember that one? The opening verse carries her motifs of stories ending sadly and fire. The chorus does feel like an attempt at a poppier hook. The dichotomy of Electric Touch either breaking her heart or bringing her back to life is really clever. Patrick Stump's verse verse feels perfectly calibrated to him despite being entirely written by Taylor. I really did like how she jumped on his verse to ad-lib with him. The bridge has many visuals and ideas that she'd later do in her career. Stars aligning in Mastermind, String Me Along While You Decide, recalling Cornelia Street's Leading Me Online, the headlights in Style. I almost forgot that headlights were mentioned in Treacherous and I Wish You Would. I love how Taylor revisits ideas and reuses motifs, down to 805 adding up to 13. And if we're even going deeper on 805, we have to reference the fact that it might be a reference to 705 by the Jonas Brothers. It really does all tie together. When Emma Falls in Love is classic Taylor country pop. The banjo in the back recalls that of Back to December and Mean. It's really crazy to think that 20-year-old Taylor was clearly already giving folklore narrator at that age. Emma is not a self-insert. The final line at the end of the chorus and in the outro, I Wish I Was Her, underscores how much of a hopeless romantic she is. The character work here is really astounding. We get a sense of who Emma is, a careful daughter worried for the worst. The chorus paints her as a Laura Jean Covey-esque character. I love the line, if Cleopatra grew up in a small town. It speaks so much volumes in one line. The verses are so dense but descriptive, but the bridge sells the song for me. She's so New York when she's in LA. Again, a very sharp line that tells us who Emma is. This deserves a place in a rom-com. Honestly, Speak Now is her rom-com album. The melody did remind me of Drops of Jupiter, which she actually covered on the tour. Funnily enough, Taylor did reveal on her July 7th show at Kansas City that this song was written about one of her best friends. Some joke that Emma's the one and only Emma Stone, who did star in Easy A in 2010 and was a friend of Taylor's, who dated Succession's Kieran Culkin at the time. Others say that it's the iconic Jane Austen heroine. Whoever Emma is, she deserves the world. I Can See You is one of the most experimental tracks that I've heard from Taylor so far. I had to check that I hadn't clicked on another album. The riff at the start is so jarring. The confidence in Taylor's tone and the I at the first verse really did remind me of Sweeter Than Fiction, another song that was experimental for her. Okay, so we have to talk about how the song would be considered very risque for Taylor in the year 2010. The motifs of a secret affair are very irresistible. This almost feels like a fun, bubbly pop rock take on illicit affairs, focused on the thrill of it all. The bridge made me realize that this was a mini spy love story, as did the lyric visuals. Jack Antonoff's production here feels very fresh compared to what he's been putting out lately. I hope he brings this sort of sound and energy to the next record with some tweaks here and there. I can see why this was cut, but unearthing and imagining a young Swift bringing this to the Big Machine bosses and giving them a heart attack is so funny. I just know Andrea Swift was shaking in the room. Castles Crumbling really evokes the Hunger Games tracks that she would later do. The harmonies and melodies remind me of Safe and Sound with a medieval twist. It's a great companion to Long Live, where she sings about a golden age, but this time from the perspective of seeing it end. It feels very prophetic of what would happen to her in 2016. Bringing in Hayley Williams for the assist, who also saw Hard Times and Scrutiny, is a deft touch. They sound amazing together on the track. Hayley brings this haunted quality that does justice to her verse. I brought up in my Speak Now essay that this record kind of feels like a sister to Reputation, and I'm doubling down with this track. It's wild to see the Castles Crumbling imagery show up again and Call It What You Want. Foolish One is one of my favorite tracks from these Vault tracks. It's possibly my favorite Vault track so far. I am a sucker for tracks about hopeless romantics paying their dues. This one feels like a prototype to the folklore love triangle. Aaron Dessner's production makes this feel like a track from the folk Evermore era. It also feels like a companion piece to Gold Rush in its themes about an unrequited doomed crush, but where she has the maturity to quash that in that song. Her narrator in this song puts herself through the ringer. The imagery of the chorus seeing them check their mailbox for confessions that will never come and taking the long way down. It was very captivating. The way that she sings You Are Not the Exception reminds me of Enchanted's Please Don't Be in Love with Someone Else. It almost feels conversational to a degree. It's really neat that Taylor's texts communicate with each other. I really love that second verse in particular because it's the bargaining stage down to imagining a future together, laughing over coffee. The pre-chorus being the voices saying you'll never learn is a very fun touch. The bridge being the reveal that it's all over is half humorous and half devastating. I really did like that line, "Goodbye screaming in silence," because that is going to be my new way of saying ghosting. "I'll get your longing glances, but you'll get your ring" is a line that we've all lived to some degree. There's a very nice vocal moment towards the end that sounds like Untouchable and Dorothea. This one and When Emma Falls in Love are my favorites. Timeless can't help but remind me of Starlight, even if its subject matter is her grandparents. The melody feels a little too close to Back to December to have been kept on that final record, but I do think that it's a very sweet song that shows off Taylor's ability to retell other people's stories. Epiphany was about Taylor's grandfather in the war, Marjorie was about her grandmother. This song feels like a companion to these stories, further coloring in their stories, this time painting their romance as fate. While it's not my favorite vault track, it's a very cute way to close out the vault tracks while continuing this album's fascination with the art of romantic storytelling. A very solid collection. Okay, so we're going to talk about the differences that I noticed. This album I was sort of scared for, but this is probably the most accurate and faithful re-recording to date that we've gotten so far. Aside from two major changes, I do think that it's almost perfect. The instrumentals sound just about the same or clearer, with new details shining through. Back to December sounds so HD to me. The vocals are so much stronger and richer than they were in 2010. Dear John maintains its wistfulness, but is recontextualized through the lens of a 33-year-old singing it back to her younger self. Fan favorites like Mine, Mean, and Sparks Fly have never sounded better. There's a slight loss of the plucky twang that Taylor had on the original recordings. I find myself singing with the twang when I was re-listening. One standout for me has to be The Story of Us. It generally somehow feels so familiar but new, like the mixing definitely emphasizes her stronger vocals while making the instrumental shine. It's like infinitely better than the original to me. When she does the "I never heard silence quite this loud," I literally ascended, and the high note at the end was perfection. My other favorite remaster is Enchanted. I'm biased because it's a classic, but the spacing between instrumentals and the way it sounds mixed this time, the guitar almost sounds like it's duetting with Taylor, and the strings sound so much richer. Taylor's steadier and fuller voice absolutely kills. The guitar solo slayed me, and the bridge with the new vocals on it, her sustained note, it's like rereading your favorite book for the first time ever. I've loved the re-recordings because we get to do that all over again for some tracks. All that being said, there are two big misses that temporarily knocked me off my dream cloud. We need to talk about the Better Than Revenge lyric change. The rest of the song is amazing and an improvement, but the change from the mattress line to the moth and flame metaphor just does not work for me. A lot of thought was taken to match the syllables, and while the imagery does work, I can't help but sing the original out of habit. On a lyrical level, it doesn't quite match the pettiness of the song or the genuine anger that I felt she had at 20. Likewise, they feel a little too sophisticated and folklore-like. It's a change that we will eventually accept, like how Lucas did the special editions for Star Wars, which new generations accept as the definitive canon. I respect Taylor's decision, because after all, this is her version. But a part of me will always long for that silly little fun campy line. The only other big omission that I noticed was the lack of the shaky breath in Last Kiss. It's not there anymore and it's noticeable. It's a very minor detail, but I adored it in the original because it really did feel like a leftover artifact from a very raw recording session. I'm guessing that it was left off because recreating it is impossible. But again, this is a very tiny quibble. Last Kiss, which Swift revealed as the saddest song she thinks she's ever written, remains one of my favorites of all time. I still bawled my eyes out when she did the bridge. Long Live is still one of my favorite closers of all time. I honestly think other than those two changes, the record's a mostly faithful retelling of a classic story that we've loved for 13 years and way more to come. New listeners are gonna love it. I have to give this remaster a strong 9 out of 10. Between fascinating vault tracks and a clear love for the original, it's definitely an underrated record that's finally getting the flowers it deserves. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning into this new installment of the Taylor Swift series that has been running on this channel for years. It really means a lot. I want to thank my subscribers, my dedicated, amazing channel members, and also just anyone who tuned in. I hope to see you next video. Feel free to comment below what your favorite vault track was and how you feel about the Speak Now re-recordings and everything. I love reading your comments and responding to them. Peace.